Welcome to day 184 of 66 and 26. On Tuesdays, we look at the Old Testament historical books. Last week, we finished off 1 Kings, and now we're in 2 Kings, the first 5 chapters. In chapter 2, we see the end of the ministry of the prophet Elijah as he's whisked up into heaven in a fiery chariot and is seen no more. And then his successor, Elisha, becomes even greater than the prophet Elijah. Elisha even asks Elijah for a double portion of his spirit after Elijah leaves. And Elijah says, well, if you see me when I go up into heaven, then you will receive that double portion. And it's true, he does. And if you look at the ministry of Elijah through 1 Kings and the beginning of 2 Kings, you'll see 7 different miracles that are attributed to Elijah. For Elisha in 2 Kings, we see 14 total miracles that are attributed to that prophet. And so double Elijah. So Elisha does some really great things in his ministry, as we see even previews of the ministry of Jesus, healing people who are sick, raising of the dead, feeding of a multitude where 100 people are fed with a small amount, whereas for Jesus, it's 5,000 or 4,000 at any given time. So we see hints and previews of Jesus' ministry in the prophets Elijah and Elisha. And then one of my favorite stories of the Old Testament is in 2 Kings chapter 5, where we see a man named Naaman. He's a commander of the king of Aram. Aram is to the north of Israel. And so one of the longtime enemies of the nation of Israel. But Naaman is sick. And there's a slave girl who has been captured from the Israelites who is attending to Naaman and his family. And she says, well, you should go see the prophet in Israel because you can be healed. And so Naaman packs up gold and silver and clothing, lots, thinking that there's going to be an expensive cost to the healing if he's going to be healed of his leprosy. And so he brings all this in a caravan to Elisha in Israel. And Elisha just tells him, go dip 7 times in the Jordan River. And Naaman thinks, well, that's really silly. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar, so much better than the Jordan River? The Jordan River is a muddy river. If you ever visit there, it's not clear, it's muddy. It begins in the Sea of Galilee, which has a reputation of being very turbulent at times. And the Jordan River ends in the Dead Sea. So it begins in turbulence, it ends in death, and muddy in between. And you think, well, there's nothing good about the Jordan River, but that's what Elisha says, go dip in the Jordan River. Naaman walks away upset. And then one of his servants says, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, you would have done it. All you have to do is go dip yourself in the Jordan 7 times. So Naaman does exactly what God said through the prophet, and he dips himself in the river, a muddy river, 7 times, and wouldn't you know it, exactly as the prophet had said, through the power of God, he was healed. Naaman was healed of his leprosy. And he still wants to go and pay for that service that Elisha had given to him. Elisha refuses any gift. And so one of the great stories of God's power through the prophets and just trusting that if you do what the Lord says, even if it makes no sense, then it will actually turn out the way God promises. That's what Naaman finds out. And it's a good reminder to us that if we trust God, even when it doesn't make sense, how can simple water or how can simple bread and wine be powerful enough for a baptism or communion? It doesn't make sense, but we trust it in faith, just as Naaman trusted God in faith and was healed. And we are healed in Jesus Christ when we trust in him.